Hi, everyone. I'm Katey Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. This week, I'm here settling into post-Emmys life and post-Fall Festival life, and now I get to do what I wait all year to do, which is focus on the Oscar race. It really is in full swing, and joining me this week as my guest co-host to take stock of everything we've learned is my colleague who joined me in Toronto to witness all that festival mayhem firsthand, eat all of the hors d'oeuvres in the process. Thank you for coming back, Richard Rushfield.
I made it back. We both did. We survived the
we crossed
hors
the border and have returned home to figure out what it is that we just saw up there. So after Richard and I talk about Oscar season and the Best Picture race as they stand, you'll be able to hear my conversation with Will Ferrell and Harper Steele. They are the titular stars of Netflix's documentary Will and Harper. It's now in theaters. It will be streaming on Netflix on September 27th, so very soon. The documentary was this big hit at Sundance as well as at Telluride and Toronto, and it's coming out just a few weeks before this election you might have heard about, at a time where, once again, trans rights are one of many things that people can't seem to stop arguing about and threatening. And Will and Harper is a film that steps very directly into that debate and very personally. And you'll definitely want to hear what Will and Harper themselves have to say about the choice to make it and to step into this conversation themselves. So, Richard, thank you again for joining me. Your hors d'oeuvres have been digested. Have you processed the movies that you saw in Toronto? Do you feel like you got any better grip on award season than before you crossed the Canadian border?
Yeah, the movies and the buzz. The biggest thing that I heard people say over and over when speaking to pundits on the trail out there was, I don't think we've seen the Best Picture winner yet. Mm-hmm. That feels like the major sentiment as I come home, although something has to win. So if we're saying that a month from now, then we're going to realize that we have seen the Best Picture yet. And
yes. I thought very interesting argument for that was that when Paramount decided they would release September 5th themselves, which played at Telluride and not Toronto, even though I think people who saw it thought that it would have played really well in Toronto. That felt to me like them saying, we've been to these festivals, we've seen what's out there, let's take a gamble on something else that maybe could have waited until next year. I don't think either of us have seen it yet, but that felt to me like confirmation of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's no steamroller here. There's no juggernaut. There's no
Oppenheimer this time.
Yeah. But if I had a small film like that, I would wait till the end, because my guess is something is going to come and start to get momentum, and then the momentum will fizzle by the end of the year, and another film will come and replace it and have momentum at the last minute, and that will be the one that wins.
You know, that's been the theory for a lot of times. I think since $1 Million Baby came out really late in the season in 2004 and managed to run away with Best Picture. But I will point out to you that the last three Best Picture winners, Oppenheimer, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Coda, all opened not quite in the first half of the year. Oppenheimer was July, but much earlier than the usual fall festival rush. So maybe there's an argument for playing the long game these days. I'm not sure if that makes a proper statistical trend, but it is interesting to me.
I mean, I think you can do that if you're an Oppenheimer or even Everything Everywhere, which made, I think it made $100 million or something. That
pretty close to it, yeah.
A big box office, so you can come in as sort of a juggernaut and have this public ratification of your film. And I mean, what's interesting about the Oscar race is always, if it was just everyone voting for what they thought was the best movie of the year, it would be a completely different race here. It's everyone voting for what they think they should be saying is the best movie, or what Oscar should be presenting as the best film, which is a very different thing. And it's all about the story and the momentum and the director's tale and the journey to make this movie, and all these other factors come into that. So I think at festivals we focus a lot on like how good the movie is, which is one element of it, but probably not even the major element.
Yeah, and I think that uncertainty about what will have that best narrative is going to be driving a lot of this season and may lead people to participate in events like what you wrote about in your newsletter last week to reach Golden Globes voters directly. You wrote about how the Penske Media Corporation owns both the Golden Globes and Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, the major trades that cover them. I mean, you can certainly sum it up better than I can, but do you think that the Golden Globes feeding frenzy is going to be even more intense this year since none of us know what's going to win Best Picture?
I mean, since the company that owns the Golden Globes can sort of turn up the dial and set the Golden Globes feeding frenzy wherever they want, I imagine they'll probably choose to set it pretty high. And I think they own all the major trades, and they can give Golden Globes whatever level of coverage they want. And I don't imagine we'll see many articles about, the Globes aren't really relevant this year, and they're not really that much of a predictor, which there's a great case to be made that they've never been that much of a predictor. That they're ratifying sentiment that is in progress. But unless people sort of say we're not going to participate in this thing and we're not going to support it, you're subject to the whims of this one company.
I mean, we obviously have a dog in this fight as a company that is independently owned. We are playing in a lot of the same awards space. We're doing events with a lot of the same people, trying to get interviewed with the same talent. You know, we're looking from the outside on all these things that are owned by Penske. But when you look at that kind of thing where, you know, as you wrote about, like Variety is offering dinners with Golden Globes voters for a award show that their parent company owns, does it bring out to you kind of the silliness of award season, or does it feel important to you in some way that not that we have ethics in Golden Globes voting, like I think that ship has sailed. I don't think that's a real thing, but that there needs to be some kind of system here that makes sense. Like, what should we be fixing about how all of this works?
The silliest argument is always what's a real awards show and what's a fake awards show, because there's nothing real about that. Somehow the Oscars are not like chosen by the National Institute of Science. You know, the Oscars can say these are the people that make movies, and they're telling you what they feel they esteem most about their profession. So that's a legitimate function that they're serving. There has to be some level of that this means something more than just someone gaming the system. And, you know, at the bottom of this, the Oscar race is way too long.
Yes.
I don't know why the Oscar is still doing it so late in the year. They should.
Because there's a lot of money to be made in the system of things that come before the Oscars that a lot of people depend on.
Less money to be made if they drive everyone away from the whole race. I mean, you know, making this a endless slog with all these precursors and everything claiming to represent an important stop on the thing, it's not winning us any friends here. And
by us, you mean media or Hollywood in general,
Hollywood.
or both?
Okay. I speak for Hollywood. Hollywood appointed me to give its opinion here. And, you know, I have a dog in the fight against Penske Media here, but more importantly, I want movies to survive. And the Oscar race is the best annual advertisement there is for cinema to the world. And when we make it a travesty, we squander that. In particular, the kind of movies that mean a lot to me, like sort of adult prestige drama, things that are different than just the giant 4-quadrant tentpoles, really depend on this race.
Okay, that's a fair point, but here we are 6 months before the Oscars, taking all of this at stock. Let's talk about what we know after Toronto, where things stand, and Best Picture in general. There's so many categories to get into. And what I wrote about in my newsletter last Thursday is about the Audience Award winner, The Life of Chuck, which as of this recording has not yet been picked up for distribution. I keep expecting every day it's going to happen, so by the time people hear this, it may have. I don't think you saw The Life of Chuck in Toronto, but
I didn't, and I got to say the buzz I heard on it was underwhelming, so I was pretty surprised. I heard a lot of, it was nice.
Yeah. Sometimes a nice movie is what it takes to win.
Yeah, but I didn't hear one person come out and say, I loved it. I can't wait for that to come out.
I heard some of that. Like, I think Mike Flanagan has a pretty strong fan base. Like, I I was aware of it. I don't think I was as aware of it as I should have been before I saw Life of Chuck and saw kind of the enthusiasm around the premiere. But it does seem to me like Life of Chuck very well could get a Best Picture nomination. As I wrote about this last week, it seems totally possible. It could also get picked up by a small distributor and punted to the spring and just be allowed to be an audience movie, which I think is a perfectly reasonable path. But it is positioned in this interesting way to challenge this baked-in notion that people like me have had that, like, if you win the Toronto Audience Award, you will be nominated for Best Picture. It's a streak that's gone on for 12 years. I feel like maybe that's a good thing. That will help break some of the fever around this 6 months awards campaign. Like, do you think that would help at all get people to come back down to earth a little bit?
I don't know. I mean, you have this cluster of festivals that are just, it's just such an obvious place to launch a campaign here. And if the Audience Award is devalued, I mean, Toronto's sort of taken this place in like as kind of the number 3 of the 3 festivals.
Of Telluride, Venice, and Toronto?
Yes.
Well, it depends on how you're ranking them, right? Toronto has the biggest audiences and the most mainstream audiences, and that counts for something when you're premiering, Life of Chuck.
In terms of where you want your film to premiere, where you would like to kick off your campaign, I just feel like Toronto is number 3 on that list right now.
I think it depends on what kind of movie you have. I mean, something we talked about a lot last year was that Saltburn premiered at Telluride first instead of Toronto. And I think a lot of people think it would have done much better in Toronto. There's younger audiences. There's more people willing to kind of take a gamble. There's a whole midnight movie aspect to it. Your favorite movie, The Substance. Do you think that would have played better in Venice than at Toronto?
It did pretty good at Cannes. So is,
that's true.
Is Cannes the same audience as...
I've never been to either. I mean, I do think they speak different languages in France and Italy. I have to fact check that, but I don't know how similar the audiences are.
I would say in a better world, Substance would be the juggernaut right now, sweeping everything else off the field. In this world, I think it's an unlikely contender.
Yeah. So you have the Life of Chuck winning the Audience Award. TBD what's going to happen there. The movie that I thought was going to win the Audience Award and came in second place was Emilia Perez, which premiered in Toronto a little bit late. It did the thing where it played at Telluride, so therefore had to come to Toronto after the first weekend. You might have already been out of town by the time Emilia Perez film. Have you seen that one yet, actually? I don't know.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so you'll get to that one eventually. But I think the fate of Netflix every year is kind of a continuing parlor game. They have had a film place with the Audience Awards every year since 2018, which is the year they had Roma and kind of really jumped feet first into Oscar campaigns. They have still yet to win Best Picture. Emilia Perez would be a really interesting one to finally break that streak for them. It's a pretty out there movie in a lot of ways, but also very accessible as the Audience Award placement suggests. I mean, there's a new film regime at Netflix. A lot has changed there since 2018. Do you feel like it matters if this is the year they finally get it, or do you think it's still possible?
Looking at the field, there's a possibility for any of the kind of plausible contenders to suddenly get momentum and become a favorite and even run away with it. They win a couple other awards here and there, and suddenly people start looking at it different. I think the problem that Netflix always has is what films like, even the films like Parasite and Everything Everywhere, is that Oscar is not voting for what it thinks is the best movie of the year. It's voting for the movie that they think they should vote for. So Oscar voters are constantly looking for cues and signs and indications of what they should be getting behind. And the biggest... Someone
to hold their hand and tell them what to vote for without them feeling like they've been told what to vote for. They have to think they came up with it themselves.
And some sort of public ratification of that, like seeing in a theater full of people, or seeing box office results. Public awareness is such a... I don't know that it will always be everything, but it's a real big factor. And it's a millstone around the neck of the Netflix campaigns that that they're competing against things that have this public wave enthusiasm when they can't claim that.
Yeah. I mean, Coda being the big exception to that, there's still like the further we get away from it, it feels a little bit more like an outlier as a Best Picture win. Like it's such a small movie. It had like this heartfelt thing. It was up against The Power of the Dog, which was Netflix's big movie, which certainly didn't. But I think that you're right. Like since COVID, since we've had Oppenheimer or even Elvis and Top Gun Maverick and Everything Everywhere, like box office has been a real thing. And you don't have to have made $100 million, but you have to have some kind of like public-facing enthusiasm. And what the Netflix
successful in whatever release pattern you went for, and the release pattern has to be more than 10 screens.
I do wonder if Emilia Perez is going to a lot of the regional festivals. It's going to be, you know, in the places where people have their country homes in October and they go to regional festivals in the Hamptons and Middleburg or wherever else. And maybe that is a place to show that kind of strength, even if you're not going to have a theatrical release. But it sounds like to you, I don't think the word Netflix is next to something on a ballot, but that voters know and that there is something stopping their hands every single time.
It's just not a tool that Netflix can have. And, you know, so in your arsenal for a movie, you have the quality of the movie is one thing, you have the story of it getting made, you have the stars and what they went through, and you have all these things, and then you have public reaction is a big thing. Maybe it's even the biggest thing. I mean, it's not like the highest grossing film of the year wins Best Picture, but it's a factor that's considered. If a movie is released and really doesn't perform well, then that kind of dooms its chances largely. So it's just a factor that when it's a streaming release that they just can't claim. Yeah.
I mean, so we're fresh off of this year where Universal won Best Picture. It's the only major studio to win Best Picture, I believe, in the past decade, because it won with Oppenheimer and Green Book. It's all been many majors or, Searchlight or something like that.
Oh, Searchlight, yeah.
Yeah, Searchlight's had an incredibly strong run there. How much do you think it matters? I mean, Universal's in the mix this year with Wicked and The Wild Robot. Warner Brothers has Dune 2. Paramount has Gladiator 2. I mean, Lord knows we've all paid enough attention to Paramount this year. Obviously, the Oscars and even these campaigns are pretty small line items on budget to these major studios. But do you feel like it matters to have the majors still in the mix here?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to completely become the indie spirits, independent spirits, like, then we can look forward to something like the independent spirits audience, which last I checked was like 100,000, 200,000 people watching that show. Oscar cannot completely divorce itself from the public in big movies. That said, people blame Oscars for why aren't they nominating big movies and everything. It's not Oscar's fault that studios don't make big budget adult dramas anymore. Oppenheimer was a real exception. There are not a lot of Oppenheimers on the studio slate this year.
Yeah, we've yet to see if there's going to be Oppenheimer copycats. My guess would be no.
Yeah, it's. James Cameron said he's going to do another film about Hiroshima, so you'll have that in 8 years or something.
He's got to finish 3 more Avatars before then. Yeah, hold your horses.
He said he would do it when Avatar production allows, which is.
He's created that Avatar production schedule. Get himself out of there.
Only 3 more to do, 2 of which haven't shot yet. So.
But is there any studio movie that you would put a lot of faith in terms of what we've seen, or like Gladiator 2, what we haven't seen?
Gladiator 2 is a question mark. The Searchlight movies, I could see. So
you're counting Searchlight for studios. It's okay to do that. Sometimes I never know how we're going to quantify this.
And Focus, for that matter, you count for Universal.
Yeah, absolutely. Focus has Conclave, which, and you talk about like mid-budget adult dramas. Conclave is like the absolute example of that this season.
Yeah, when I saw the trailer for Conclave, which is all I've seen to date, I said, oh, that could be a movie that, just a thriller that just grips everybody, and that could absolutely sweep the field in a way. Yeah, I mean,
it's the kind of movie you could tell anyone in your life to go see, which really, you don't always get that. Last year, I feel like we had a really good crop of like Anatomy of a Fall. It's in French, but like totally accessible to anybody. Then Barbie, Oppenheimer, Holdovers, even Poor Things. Like there was a very accessible but interesting bunch of Best Picture nominees last year, and I feel like Conclave could be a good way to continue that trend.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, as long as a movie's got like some toe in kind of prestige, like talking about bigger theme, elevate. Like, it's not just Fast and the Furious 14. Like, it just, but it's just got to be like a tiny bit, not like Fast and like more. Then it can be a plausible contender here.
Yeah. I mean, the big question that I don't know how to answer, but I feel like I'm going to keep asking in various formats for months is how highbrow are the Oscars now, and how much can you embrace something lowbrow? Like, Nora is a Palme d'Or winner and a highbrow movie, but it's also about like a sex worker who, like, Mikey Madison learned how to do stripteases for this role, and there's a lot of rap played in it and like crazy Russian kids blowing money in Vegas. I don't think of the Oscar voters, like the new crop of international Oscar voters, as snobs, but they are much more willing to look far afield and take risks. And I don't totally know what shape that's going to take. And I don't know if Conclave counts for that, or if that's appealing to some other branch of voters who are more like the ones who existed 20 years ago. I think there's kind of a Rorschach test to happen for the Academy with what we've got this year.
Yeah. And I think I could see Complete Unknown. That feels like something that can check a lot of boxes, because nothing Oscar loves more than a celebrity impersonation, than a performance playing another performer.
That's continued to be true even as the Academy has changed.
Yeah, that's the number one favorite thing. So you have,
although that raises the question for Saturday night, which I know that you and I at least talked to some of the talent. Did you see the movie, or did you just get to witness Corey Michael Smith in person?
I liked it very much.
Yeah, I had a really good time with it too, and I'm very curious about how that flavor of celebrities impersonating celebrities, true Hollywood story, is going to play out in the Oscar mix this year. I don't really know yet.
And the question for me about Saturday Night is, if you don't know what Saturday Night Live was, and you don't know who Gilda Radner was and everything, it doesn't help you out that much with. There's no backstory or explanation given. So how that will play, but I think I don't know that I've seen a better depiction of the theatrical process coming together and what it's like for a show to come together. And I've covered a lot of things, and I've been at these shows where they're saying 3 minutes to air, and you're just like, oh my God, this is insane. It's not gonna happen. Nobody's in their seats. People don't have costumes on. They're still the set has collapsed, and somehow it comes together, like the magic of like everything coalescing in that creative process. I've never seen something depict that better than Saturday Night. And if there's something that people who work in the arts would respond to, that seems very potent.
You made me realize that there's not, we have A Complete Unknown where you've got Bob Dylan, obviously, but there's not really any other like movies about making movies or television this year, which is another kind of tried and true Oscar genre. Like, we all remember being the Ricardos, which pundits had left for dead, showing up with 3 Oscar nominations. So that's a really good point. There is still that little bit of like, yes, you recognize what we had to do to get here.
But Timothée Chalamet, the hottest actor of our day, doing this performance that he totally immersed himself in by years of accounts, playing the most beloved artist of a generation there, Nobel Prize
beloved and baffling and so many
Nobel
other things.
Prize winning art, and his, that could move a lot of votes there.
Yeah. A Complete Unknown, Gladiator 2, Wicked, and then Focus has Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers horror movie. Or I guess horror. We don't really know how horror-y it is. Opening on Christmas Day, it's a wild crop of Christmas Day releases this year. Those are the big questions. Oh, and Juror Number 2, the Clint Eastwood movie. I should add that. That's premiering at AFI. There's not a lot of those big question marks left.
I would say with Robert Eggers, I would say Oscar has shown it's willing to be sort of edgy and different. You can never be formally challenging. It can never be like, this is hard to watch.
I think the Zone of Interest would beg to differ with you on that.
Which did not win and was not
even.
It
won 2 Oscars. It won for sound
didn't win
and
Best
screenplay.
Picture.
No, it didn't win for fine.
Yeah, won sound.
Zone of Interest won 2 more Oscars than I certainly thought that it would when I first saw it in Toronto.
I think you can be a nominee, but
sure.
But if you're a movie that's like makes it difficult for the audience to watch, is gonna not be a serious contender to win.
That To win is a different thing than being nominated. I agree with you. I will say that The Lighthouse, which was an incredibly difficult movie to watch that Robert Eggers made, did get a surprise nomination for cinematography. So the Oscars are paying attention to him. And if Nosferatu is fun and challenging, as opposed to being kind of bleak and challenging like The Lighthouse, I feel like there's potential there. But again, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and I think this also, the streaming era ironically doesn't help these movies because if it's a difficult film to watch, people watching it in their houses or in their homes are likely not going to do it all in one sitting.
Likely to tune out. Yeah, but then again, with the Zone of Interest, Zone of Interest winning for sound was so interesting to me because that's showing that it's not just the sound designers who would have nominated it, but the broader Academy saw it in enough proper context to notice what the sound design was doing. It wasn't subtle sound design, but it's a very important part of the storytelling. So I agree with what you're saying about people like watching things on screeners and being inclined to tune out, but it gave me some faith that some of them are really paying attention where it counts.
Could be. It's but I haven't seen Nosferatu, so
same.
It could end up being the biggest crowd pleaser that ever walked. So
to me, of the late breaking movies, the space I'm holding for the most is Gladiator 2, especially in Best Director, where you've got some really interesting young-ish, directors breaking through. Like Sean Baker looks really young, not as young as he looks, but still fairly new on the scene. Or like Ramel Ross, director of Nickel Boys, Brady Corbett, director of Brutalist. But Ridley Scott still doesn't have an Oscar. And I feel like if Gladiator 2 delivers and it's done well, the idea of being like, all right, Ridley, we're finally going to get you one. Like, it's been way too long. That's really compelling to me. I think the movie has to be good. It's not like a default space being held for him, but it would not surprise me if that narrative took hold once that movie gets seen.
Yeah, he's doing it. It's kind of funny because Gladiator won, even if he didn't. So I think people sort of think of him as having an Oscar.
Yes.
So they've got to first make it clear that, oh no, you didn't give it to him for that. It's
well, he's known to be kind of punchy in his interviews, so I feel like he wouldn't mind getting out there and reminding people if he gets the chance. All right, Richard, before we wrap it up, I don't feel like I have to be neutral in award season, but there's a long way to go. I don't want to start putting my thumb on the scale too early, but you can, and I want to know what you're rooting for. Like, what do you feel? Or are you rooting against? You're welcome to go negative. Just like at this point in the season, what has your attention, has your rooting interest?
Well, if it was just what I think is the best movie of the year, I'd be pushing for The Substance. And
I think you should. I'm seeing it tonight as we speak. I'm finally going to get to see it.
It's a great, unbelievable movie. It's the most daring and artistically bold movie, and it has something that it's a movie with something to say, and it has important things to say. I think you will see why after you see it. It's not likely to be a serious contender there.
I'm talking to my friend who I'm going to see it with, and we were both like, can we handle the amount of gore? Do we just have to plan to look at our laps at strategic moments? I'm a little nervous.
I have not seen Amelia Perez. I have not seen Honora. I have not seen Conclave.
You got time.
So I'm reserving. I would say take those three and A Complete Unknown, which I'm throwing in there, and the best picture will be in that group.
Nora, Amelia Perez, Conclave, A Complete Unknown. That's your four.
Yes.
None
of which I've seen, so it's I speak totally.
That's how all the best predictions are made.
With ignorance, so.
I think that is a great crop that you've picked, and we'll check back in 6 long months to see how any of your predictions panned out.
It's just around the corner.
Okay, I'll be right back in a moment with my conversation with Will Ferrell and Harper Steele. First, though, please, if you're listening on Spotify or want to head over to Spotify, you can answer this week's poll. Honestly, I would love to know this as information of what to keep talking about this season. I want to know from you what you think the biggest stories or scandals or questions of this year's award season will be. It will be a multiple choice. I'll pick some, but if you want to send me more, Katey@theankler.com. Let's keep talking about it. Now let's hear my conversation with Will Ferrell and Harper Steele. They're the titular stars of the new documentary, Will and Harper. It starts streaming on Netflix this weekend. It's been in theaters for a few weeks. Will and Harper have been friends for almost 30 years since they started working on Saturday Night Live the same week in 1995. But in the last few years, they've hit some pretty major friendship milestones. First, there was the road trip that is at the center of the documentary. It was inspired both by Harper's longtime love of road trips and also Will's desire to reconnect with her after Harper transitioned to living openly as a woman a few years ago. And now they're out there promoting the film. They were at Sundance, then they were at Telluride in Toronto this fall. And I was curious to find out how all of this has affected their friendship and really what it's been like for Harper, who was the writer behind SNL sketches and movies like Eurovision and is now in the spotlight herself and what that's felt like. So we talked about all of that, as well as their high hopes for how this documentary can make a positive impact in what's a pretty, frankly, terrifying time for trans rights in this country. Hear it all in my conversation with Will Ferrell and Harper Steele. If you don't mind me starting from the very beginning of the doc, I know that it was Will's idea to make the doc, and then I think I read that it was about 3 months of kind of figuring out the logistics of how to make this thing a reality. And I'm curious about what were the big sticking points or things you really wanted to make sure you had right before knowing that you could pull this documentary off and it would be what you both wanted it to be.
Well, it wasn't 3 months of pulling off any logistics. It was 3 months of me just making the basic decision of whether I wanted to go on camera and talk about this with my friend Will. There was another 6 months of logistics that was a different conversation about what form it was going to take and how did we want to do it. But the first 3 months were just me wrestling with the concept. And I can't really say the one thing that brought me around, but I do like working with Will. I've worked with Will in the past, and whenever I get a chance to do it, I think we are both very comfortable in that way, and it's fun. We also like to do things that are a little strange or offbeat, and this sounded very strange and offbeat. And then finally, there was quite a bit of anti-trans legislation and, things coming up over this summer, a couple summers ago when we did this. And those bills keep increasing, and it keeps getting the volume keeps getting ratcheted up around trans issues, and I thought maybe we could, maybe do something.
There was also some time, it took some time to figure out who was going to direct it. Mm-hmm. And there had to be someone we both felt comfortable with. Yeah. And when Josh's name came up, he was kind of unique in the sense that we had both known him from narrative projects, but he had this experience doing docs as well. And I was like, Harper just has to feel comfortable. So I think you guys had a couple meetings where we made sure, we knew Josh spoke our same comedy language, but would he also be there for the heart and the vulnerability there as well?
And then I think y'all said at the Sundance premiere that there was a point where you thought you might script some, comedic moments into it and kind of set up scenarios. And I'm curious how far that went. How long did you think that was going to be the case? And then when did you ditch it?
The whole thing was a confusing mess to us. Right. I didn't really ever know what it would be. Yeah. And being the people who write comedy and make stuff, we just kept going like, well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. It wasn't until his producing partner, Jessica Elbaum, during one of these meetings turned to us and just said, why don't you guys just do this? And I don't even think we knew what she was talking about. We were just like, what?
Doing our usual banter back and forth. It should just be this, you guys. You don't need to think of extra bits.
Yeah, and, which I'm very happy we didn't end up doing because they would have been terrible.
Even though one of the critical bits that you thought of was we should try to think of a theme song.
Oh, that's true.
Farm that out to someone to think of. And
that's true.
That
did come up. But that's just the kind of bit we would have come up with just driving anyway.
Right.
So.
Right.
And when you go to a stock car race or to a fireworks store, is there a part of you being like, well, this could be a setup for an interesting, not necessarily a bit, but a conversation with somebody? And then do you just pick locations based on that and see what comes of that? And that's the best you can do for creating bits?
The locations had to mean something. So, the locations like the basketball game, we have a shared history of going to basketball games, obviously, my hometown, the kinds of dive bars that I like to do before I transitioned. So most things had reasons. The fireworks was just exciting. We just saw it on the side of the road to get across.
We've got to go there. That's the largest fireworks place I've ever seen.
Exactly. We need to stop there. So that was probably fairly impromptu.
Yeah, and looking back, a massive fireworks warehouse is so symbolic of America, both good and bad.
Yeah.
There's a lot, like a 72-ounce steak also is its own symbolism. There's a lot of that to be found in this movie. Not to kind of peek behind the curtain too much on how it's made, but, you're taking this trip. It's just you two in that car a lot of the time, but Josh is there. You've got another production team. There's microphones. Like, what does that look like for you when you're driving that car? How much are you talking to Josh? How do you be yourselves while there is a small apparatus of filmmaking around you, but it's still there? How do you work that out?
He made sure it was a very small footprint, and he made sure that for the most part, in terms of the driving, that the cameras are just mounted on the hood of the car. So there's no one, they're being operated remotely.
Are you driving with the camera operated on the hood of the car? How is that? Is that legal?
No camera operators, just the cameras themselves are mounted on the car.
Okay.
And we're driving, I mean...
And I didn't know you could do that without getting pulled over.
No, you know what? We didn't know you could do it without getting pulled over either. And there are moments where it definitely looked illegal, I can tell you that. But it was left alone. And also, Josh told us this important piece of information 2 or 3 days into the shooting, because he's done 6 or 7 documentaries. We would forget that the cameras are there. And it's not a total forget, but we got very comfortable. I don't think we noticed cameras after a while. We really didn't. So
they really kind of fall away into the background.
Do you think you can see, because it's a chronological story, so I'm wondering if in some of those early scenes that you see yourselves noticing the camera more than you did later? Is that something you can see?
The first couple of days, I'm feeling it's a little unnatural. Like, I don't know if people watching it are going to feel that, but I certainly felt it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wondered in the scene in the parking lot in Indiana, I think in the Walmart parking lot, it felt like that was maybe like the first kind of heart-to-heart you'd had that was on camera, and I wondered if that was one of the ones where it was like, okay, we got to go be ourselves despite all this.
Yeah, I mean, around Indiana in general is where we sort of lost track of the cameras, so I think that's a good observation. I mean, it took a little while.
But I think that Walmart parking lot is one of the moments where Harper really hits me with a question that I hadn't thought about, and you can see I think I'm just trying to give her the most honest answer I can give, and not to mention there's cars driving around us.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Harper, you mentioned this earlier about the decision to be visible and this being a tough one for you, and that was what took the time. And I think that's a tough decision for anybody who steps into public life, but you had been around people like Will and other people who were in public life and really were behind the scenes, and that was the career that you made for yourself. Did you learn anything from watching people like Will or other people in the public eye about how you wanted to do it or what you didn't want to do, or did that prepare you in any way for this moment?
Probably not. I mean, one thing I will notice about some of my best friends who are celebrities, they know how to enforce boundaries, you know? I don't know that, and I'm not really, to me, it's a bit of a shit show. I'm not interested in it as much, but I do think I respect the people, Molly Shin and Will Ferrell. These people who are very good at saying no without, I mean, if you go out in the world with Will Ferrell, it's really quite like he gets mauled by everyone because everyone comes up to him and says, "You are my favorite," and that's a lot of favorites, and so it can be difficult. And I just watch him navigate it with a lot of grace, and also a lot of comfortable decision making. I'm not going to stop for these people. I will stop for these people. No, I don't mean that in a way. You have to make these decisions in life. Yeah. I obviously am not going to experience that at that same level, but I think maybe I just noticed that if I get more visible, then boundaries just have to be more something I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Will, like, obviously Harper's decision to be in this film there's more at stake for her, but for you, like, going into a Pacers game, going into a steakhouse, like, there is a risk for you in that as well. Did you think about that in this process of figuring out and how many of your boundaries you could stay established while making this movie?
I really didn't think about it, to be quite honest. Once we made the decision to do this, and there's kind of I just feel like fear dissipates when you're supporting someone you truly care about, regardless of what they're going through. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, it didn't mean that I wasn't uncomfortable at times and wanted to make sure she was comfortable and those sorts of things. But I deliberate things for a while, but once I kind of make that decision, I just don't look back. And so no, I really didn't think about it.
Yeah. I like what you said at Telluride about how now that you're both in the spotlight and getting called people's favorites, that you're enjoying it, and also that Harper hates it and is not accepting that there's this much acclaim. Is that still happening?
It's pure joy for me. Yeah.
Are you getting any more used to it, Harper, as this goes on?
No.
Maybe a little bit.
Well, I'm getting more comfortable talking about it, but yes. Sure. But yeah, in the end of the day, no, this is not my life moving forward.
And the praise is, you can't let it sink in, otherwise you...
No, I will not let that sink in.
It's been interesting in other interviews you guys have done, kind of looking back on some of your previous work, maybe talking about how your humor has changed, things you did in the past that you wouldn't do now. But I wondered if, even in the course of making this movie, if your shared sense of humor has changed at all, or if that's like a fundamental thing that kind of stays the same between two people. It's what bonded you together. Do you think like you still mostly find the same things funny together that you did 30 years ago?
Yeah, it always changes. It always morphs and with growth or getting older or what are we laughing at now. That's a constantly moving target for both of us. But there's a base and a way of being humorous that hasn't changed since the day we met.
I think it's structurally the same.
It's the same. I insult Will, he laughs.
Yes.
And then he figures out a way to insult me.
Yes. I play put upon. I get really down and insolent. Wait, insolent?
Insolent.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
I think the Dunkin' Donuts bit is insolent. Like that's the tone of what we're doing there.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of we're just driving and we're having, we're stuck in traffic, I think.
Yeah.
Like driving through Flagstaff, and I just spotted that Dunkin' Donuts, and I thought, oh, this is a good bit opportunity. And I just threw a fit only because, but it's funny, I could be driving with a number of other friends and people, and I would not do that. I would not, but if I can make her laugh, I was just like, oh, this will make her laugh. There's no bigger pleasure than making each other laugh in a way. So
I think you guys said that when you first started making it, one of the things to work around was the idea of commodifying your friendship, is I think the word one of you used. And I'm curious what that means in general, like what you were.
I don't remember.
No.
I don't.
Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth.
There's no way that we can commodify this friendship. We've tried to commodify it on screen and we've gotten negative reviews. So It's not a commodity.
So there wasn't a concern about losing something by making this. It was all something you could gain.
No, I don't think so, no.
No, because the fallback is if no one's going to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what going in, we were like, we had a really amazing adventure, and we're putting our feet in the water in the Pacific Ocean going, I don't think there's a movie there. I don't know if there's anything that really was really compelling.
Right.
So, yeah, and then Josh, that's where Josh comes into play.
Yeah. To promise you that it was not all a waste of everybody's time. You could do something. What didn't make the cut? I mean, obviously, the hours and hours didn't make the cut. Was there anything that, is there a theme to what you guys tried that didn't work out or wasn't, didn't make sense to be part of the film?
2-hour meeting in the Oval Office with Joe Biden.
You changed everything.
Yeah. He is lying.
Amazing.
Go to see Joe Biden.
But they wouldn't sign the release. Anyway. No, that did not happen. In fact, we totally got shut out.
There's 250 hours of footage. So there's just so much. If you want to see a 250-hour version, I don't think we wouldn't advise you to do that, but it's probably, yeah.
But there's nothing you guys really wish had managed to make it.
That's impossible. I mean, again, Josh made a lot of good decisions, and he could have made different decisions, but, you know, he told the story when I don't think we really saw the story happening. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that was the most important. And so there's nothing to really look at and go, could you have more? I don't know.
I think, too, from our background in what we do, we so respect the art of editing. Mm-hmm. And for us to sit there and watch the very first time we saw it, which we couldn't believe that he had crafted this movie that you actually were entertained by, but still found those moments of vulnerability that I don't think there was any part of us that went, okay, that's good, but what about this? We were just blown away by the kind of magic trick of it all. And I mean, in terms of notes, Harper had some musical notes maybe here and there.
Tiny notes, and a couple of notes where my dysphoria hit me and I didn't look good.
And the only other thing we lobbied for was in the hot air balloon, me yelling at the dog wasn't in the original cut. And Josh was feeling like, I don't know if this scene is working. I'm like, well, maybe what if you did the dog thing as like a bit of a button, and that could maybe. Mm-hmm. And
so the comedy knowledge of editing, but also when you need a button, it kind of works both ways. Was there anything when you were filming where you told him he couldn't film it or told him to put the camera down?
No, nothing.
No, we really committed to being the subjects in a true sense of the word.
He told us that we would always have the ability to not have something screened in the end. But even there, again, I touched about 8 seconds of this thing as a no, and the rest of it, I was fine with it.
So when you go from thinking maybe there's no movie here to then watching it at the Sundance premiere, what was that like for you guys? Was there terror or...
It was shock.
Shock?
I mean, surprise, right? I mean,
I just had to let Harper know, like, this doesn't happen. Like, an ovation like that in that theater that's kind of extends for as long as it did. And I've been in that Eccles Theater for a number of things as a producer and once as an actor, and I've gotten, some lovely response, but nothing to that extent. And it was amazing. It was incredible.
You've been able to reunite now, like you're on this press tour, which is not really the same as the road trip you did together. But, like grown-ups don't get to spend this kind of time with their friends usually. Like it's hard to like this time together. So what's it been like having this time together now, talking about the movie? Is it making you better friends? Is it tearing you apart? Like does it feel any similar at all to being on the road trip? Is it really different?
This will be the end of our friendship.
Yeah, we need a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we definitely need a break.
Everyone needs a break.
Like a 10-year break.
I told her though, you're going to hate me after the end of this press tour. It's way more than you can even imagine.
I didn't know what a press tour meant, so it's been a miserable experience to me, except talking to you. It's the one.
No, sure. No, I'm the exception. I appreciate that. Well, no, Will, you've done press tours before. You have that experience. Like, is doing it with someone who is your good friend and isn't as burned out by this whole process? Is it easier? Is it more fun?
No, this has been the best. It's easy. It's like. But it doesn't feel like work the way other press tours can. I think partly because we're talking about something that's so meaningful to both of us, and a lot of times we get to do it with Josh, our director, too. And it's the questions have been super interesting, and and the response as seems like it's been very earnest in terms of how this movie is affecting people.
Yeah. Well, and Harper, you said I think you wanted to step into some kind of activism, maybe not totally sure what that would be yet. So it sounds like staying in the spotlight is your plan, even if it's not quite this, level of spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, when you say spotlight, I mean, activism doesn't have to be. I'm not running for president. I'm not running for office.
Sure.
I just think it would be nice to be involved in the queer community a little bit more and help trans people more. I mean, I don't know if that's spotlight or not, but that's me just giving a little bit more now that I've been through it and I know what it is.
I assume you've got people kind of knocking on your door saying, look, here are all the different things you can volunteer for. Are you still just kind of figuring out what that'll look like for you?
Yeah, that's a process. And again, I haven't really had time to think about it.
Sure.
Dance Happet, then this, and now this press tour. And I'm assuming after the press tour is over, there will be some opportunities for me to do exactly that, help where I can.
Did either of y'all have time? So it premieres at Sundance in June and then comes to Telluride in September. So there's like a summer and spring in there where you kind of know this movie's gone well. It's going to have this Netflix release. It's going to have this platform, but it's not out there yet. Did either of you get time to kind of prepare for what this would feel like? Did you even try to?
I loved the summer because I ignored it. I did.
It seems healthy.
I really did. And I was working on a Netflix show and I was in a comedy room the whole summer. And I just was having a lot of fun doing that. And I just did not think about it at all.
Yeah. Same for you, Will?
I think I went about my life, and Sundance was such a positive response. It obviously led to the sale of the film. Netflix, when we sat with them, they were so enthusiastic, so over the top in terms of their support, that as I thought about that off in the distance, this period of time, I did think, oh, this could be really special. But we don't allow ourselves to think that far ahead.
In general.
In a weird way.
Yeah.
Just about the things we work on, because, you've heard it so many times from people who come to you and say, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And then it for whatever reason, doesn't land that way. But I didn't imagine, I mean, we had as great as Sundance went, and then to go to Telluride, and that was amazing for us. And then the Toronto Film Festival, it was a 3-minute standing ovation that would have gone on longer had Harper not grabbed the microphone and said, everyone sit down. You need to stop. It was such an outpouring of love that's something we never could have predicted.
Yeah. I mean, there's such a spirit of like optimism in this movie, even though it's very frank about the challenges that face trans people around the country. Ever since the movie's been made, there's been more of them. But it does give me hope in some way about, the power of movies like this to change people. And is that an optimism you guys are feeling as this movie gets out there? Like, do you feel like this is, not that this is going to change everything, but that better things can be ahead?
I don't want to predict how people are going to receive it or how it. Well, I mean, people have been coming up to us and say they love it, but in general, I can't predict any kind of optimism there. I like to express and present how optimistically joyful it is to be trans, and I think if I can keep that note out there and that message out there, there may be a father with a trans kid that can see this movie, who likes Ricky Bobby, who then can see some way into that conversation with that kid and how fortunate it is to have that kid.
This show is edited by Brett Fuchs and co-produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, the Ankler himself, Richard Rushfield. Get the Prestige Junkie newsletter by going to theankler.com. Subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, where you can answer this week's poll, or on Apple or anywhere else you get your podcasts. We will see you next week.